In the quiet town of Tamworth, Staffordshire, where the streets wound gently through rows of modest brick houses, and the air carried the faint hum of everyday life, Keely Bunker was known as the girl who lit up any room she entered. At just 20 years old, she had a laugh that echoed like summer wind chimes and eyes that sparkled with the promise of a bright future. Keely dreamed of becoming a teaching assistant, helping young children navigate the world with the same kindness she offered everyone around her. She was the heart of her family, the beloved daughter of Debbie Watkins, a devoted sister to her sibling who adored her vibrant spirit, and a cherished niece to those who saw in her the embodiment of joy. Her life, though ordinary in its rhythms, was filled with simple pleasures, nights out with friends, family gatherings, and the anticipation of milestones yet to come. Little did anyone know that on the evening of September 18, 2019, as Keely stepped out to celebrate her recent birthday, her world would collide with a darkness hidden in plain sight. The night began like so many others, full of excitement and the carefree energy of youth. Keely, dressed in her favorite outfit, a simple top and leggings that hugged her frame comfortably, met up with a close friend, Monique, for a concert in Birmingham. The city lights twinkled as they arrived at the venue, the Snobs nightclub, a popular spot pulsing with music and laughter. Among the crowd was Wesley Street, a 20-year-old man from Tamworth who had known Keely since childhood. They had grown up in the same circles, sharing schoolyard memories and the occasional hello over the years. To Keely, Wesley was just a familiar face, a friend from the past who seemed harmless enough. She trusted him, as one trusts someone who's been part of your life since you were kids. That trust would prove to be her undoing. As the concert wound down, the group decided to make their way back to Tamworth, a journey that would take them on a train and then a short walk home. It was around 4 a.m. when they arrived in the early morning hush of their hometown. The streets were empty, the only sounds the distant rumble of a passing car and the soft footsteps of the friends parting ways. Monique had intended to walk Keely home, but as the group dispersed, Wesley stepped forward. "I'll walk her," he offered casually, his voice carrying the nonchalance of someone doing a simple favor. Keely, tired from the night but happy, nodded in agreement. The walk was only about 20 minutes, a familiar path through the quiet neighborhoods leading to her front door. What could go wrong on such a short stroll with an old acquaintance? As they set off, the cool September air brushed against their skin, carrying the faint scent of damp earth from nearby parks. Keely chatted lightly, perhaps recounting highlights from the concert or sharing laughs about the evening's antics. Wesley walked beside her, his presence unremarkable at first, but beneath his calm exterior, something darker stirred, a fixation that had simmered for longer than anyone realized. CCTV footage from later that night would capture their figures moving together, Keely's steps seeming hesitant at times, as if she sensed a shift in the air. They passed a telephone box near Wesley's home, a point where he would later claim they parted ways. But the cameras told a different story. They continued on, heading toward Wigginton Park, a green expanse on the edge of town dotted with trees and a winding brook. The park was shrouded in darkness, the moon casting long shadows over the grass and water. Wesley suggested a detour, perhaps under the pretense of a quick smoke or a moment to catch their breath. Keely, trusting and unsuspecting, followed. It was here, in the secluded woods, that the night turned into a nightmare. Wesley's intentions unraveled like a frayed thread. He attacked her, forcing himself upon her in a brutal assault that shattered the fragile peace of the early morning. Keely fought back with every ounce of strength she had, her hands clawing at his arms, leaving scratches on his face and neck, marks that would later betray him. She screamed, her voice echoing through the trees, but the park was empty, swallowing her cries in its silence. The struggle was fierce. Defensive wounds marred her neck and arms, evidence of her desperate bid for survival. In the end, Wesley's hands closed around her throat, applying a chokehold that lasted not seconds, but agonizing minutes. Keely's struggles weakened as oxygen fled her body, her eyes wide with terror and betrayal. She gasped for air that wouldn't come, her mind flashing to her family, her dreams, the life she was just beginning to live. When it was over, her body went limp, a lifeless form on the cold ground. Wesley, in a haze of panic or calculation, dragged her to the nearby brook, partially submerging her in the shallow water. He pulled her leggings and underwear down around her ankles, a final indignity in the aftermath of his violence. Then, he covered her with branches and leaves, a crude attempt to conceal his crime. Satisfied for the moment, he walked home, climbed into bed, and slept, as if the horror of what he'd done could be erased by closing his eyes. The morning broke with worry. Killy hadn't come home. Her mother, Debbie, paced the house, her heart heavy with unease. Friends and family mobilized quickly. Monique, racked with guilt for not walking her home, joined the search. Posters went up around Tamworth, social media buzzed with pleas for information, and police were called in. Wesley, feigning concern, even participated in the early efforts, pointing searchers toward the telephone box where he claimed they'd parted. But as the day wore on, the search intensified, volunteers combing the parks and paths Keely might have taken. Among them was Keely's uncle, Jason Brown, a man whose love for his niece drove him to scour every inch of the landscape. As evening fell on September 19th, Jason ventured into Wigginton Park, his eyes scanning the underbrush along the stream. The light was fading, casting eerie shadows, but something caught his eye, a flash of red amid the greenery. He pushed through the foliage, his breath catching as he spotted hair and an arm adorned with a familiar bracelet. It was Keely. A horrendous scream tore from his throat, echoing through the park like a primal wail of grief. "I found her!" he shouted, collapsing to his knees beside the brook. Nearby, an off-duty police officer, Dean Reynolds, heard the cry and rushed over. He confirmed the worst, no pulse, rigor mortis setting in. The scene was heartbreaking. Keely's body face down in the water, partially hidden but not enough to escape discovery. Police cordoned off the area, divers searched the waters, and the investigation shifted from missing person to homicide. Word spread like wildfire through Tamworth. The community reeled, vigils sprang up, flowers piled at the park's entrance, and questions swirled about what had happened to this vibrant young woman. An autopsy revealed the brutal truth. Keely had been raped and strangled, her body bearing the marks of a violent struggle. DNA evidence from the scene pointed unmistakably to Wesley Street. He was arrested just an hour after the body was found, his initial story crumbling under scrutiny. "We parted at the telephone box," he insisted at first, but CCTV footage showed otherwise. They had entered the park together. As detectives pressed him, his accounts shifted like sand, first denying involvement, then admitting he was there but claiming accident. 4 versions in total before the trial, each more desperate than the last. The other women came forward too, their stories painting a chilling pattern. Wesley faced charges not just for Keely, but for 2 additional rapes and 3 sexual assaults on young women he'd known, friends or acquaintances who had trusted him as Keely had. One victim spoke of finding courage in Keely's story to share her own pain. These allegations spanned years, revealing Wesley not as a one-time offender, but a predator who exploited familiarity. He had once dreamed of a football career, even earning a scholarship with local clubs like Litchfield and Tamworth, but that path had veered into warehouse work and, now, infamy. No fixed address at the time of arrest, he embodied a rootless danger lurking in the shadows of normalcy. The trial at Stafford Crown Court began in July 2020, a somber affair under the weight of COVID restrictions, but the testimony cut deep. Prosecutor Jacob Hallam QC laid out the case methodically, describing how Keely had trusted Wesley on that fatal walk. CCTV clips played for the jury. Keely dancing joyfully at the club, oblivious to the eyes watching her too intently. Wesley's grin in the footage hinted at obsession, a predator sizing up prey. The rugby club footage, never publicly released, showed their final moments together. Keely trying to pull away, Wesley persistent. Forensic evidence was damning. His DNA inside her, scratches matching her nails, GPS from his phone placing him at the scene not once, but 5 times after the murder. To cover her up, he claimed, though the branches were scant. Wesley took the stand, his voice steady but eyes evasive. He admitted lying initially out of fear and embarrassment. "We were flirting," he said, painting a picture of mutual attraction, kisses, teasing glances on the walk home. In the park, he claimed, things escalated to consensual act. During the act, he put his arm around her neck playfully, but she went limp after 10 to 30 seconds. He tried to revive her with chest compressions and head massages, but failed. Panicked, he hid the body and went home to sleep, returning later to add branches for dignity. The jury listened, but the prosecution dismantled his tale. The chokehold took minutes, not seconds. Her scratches showed resistance, not play. He hadn't panicked. He'd rested, then revisited his handiwork. Emotional testimonies pierced the courtroom air. Debbie's voice broke as she described being robbed of her precious and beautiful daughter. Keely's sister called her one of the most vibrant, caring, and beautiful souls this earth has ever seen. Friends remembered her kindness, her dreams cut short. The judge, Paul Farrer, saw through the facade. "You proceeded to rape Keely Bunker, in the course of which you murdered her by throttling her," he said at sentencing. Wesley's history of non-consensual acts sealed his fate. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury returned, guilty on all counts. On August 7, 2020, Wesley Street was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 29 years and 46 days. The judge emphasized the loss, not just Keely's unfulfilled ambition to teach, but the void in her family's life. "You may never be released," he warned, noting lifelong license if paroled. Detective Inspector Cheryl Hannon called him a devious and manipulating character who preyed on trust. The community exhaled, but the scars remained. In the years since, Tamworth honors Keely with memorials and awareness campaigns, her story a stark reminder of hidden dangers. Her family clings to memories, vowing to keep her light alive. Wesley rots in prison, his lies exposed, while Keely's spirit endures, a testament to resilience amid tragedy. The August air in Pimlico was thick and heavy, clinging to the elegant white stuccoed terraces of Alderney Street like a damp shroud. It was Monday, the 23rd of August, 2010, and inside the top-floor flat of number 36, a suffocating heat had been building for days. The residents of the handsome mansion block, a stone's throw from the River Thames, had noticed a faint, sweet, cloying smell in the communal hallway, but in the height of a London summer, strange odors were not uncommon. They dismissed it as a problem with the drains, a forgotten bag of rubbish, the mundane realities of city life. But for the colleagues of Gareth Williams, the man who lived in that top-floor flat, a different kind of unease had been growing. Williams, a quiet and intensely private 31-year-old, was known for his meticulous professionalism. He was a codebreaker, a mathematician of prodigious talent, on a 3-year secondment to the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, from the government's listening post, GCHQ. He was not the kind of man to simply disappear. Yet, he had missed meetings. He was not answering his phone. For 7 days, an unnerving silence had emanated from his usually responsive presence. Finally, the concern reached a tipping point. A welfare check was ordered. 2 police officers arrived at Alderney Street that afternoon, their boots echoing in the quiet, carpeted stairwell as they climbed to the top floor. They knocked, their raps sounding loud and intrusive in the stillness. There was no answer. After consulting with the building's management, the decision was made to force entry. The lock on the pristine white door gave way with a crack. The first thing that hit the officers was the heat. It was a physical presence, a wave of stagnant, oppressive warmth that seemed to suck the air from their lungs. The central heating in the flat was on, inexplicably turned up high despite the summer outside. Then came the smell, now overwhelming, an insidious sweetness of decay that caught in the back of the throat. The flat was immaculate, almost sterile. The living room was neat, the kitchen tidy. A woman's wig, part of a collection of high-end female clothing and shoes worth thousands of pounds, was draped over a chair, an incongruous detail in the otherwise Spartan apartment. The officers moved cautiously, methodically, their senses on high alert. They checked the main bedroom. It was empty. Then they moved to the ensuite bathroom. And there it was. In the pristine white bathtub sat a large red North Face holdall. It was a vibrant, jarring splash of color in the otherwise muted tones of the bathroom. The bag was zipped shut, and a brass padlock secured the two zippers together. It seemed oddly out of place, a piece of luggage left in the most unlikely of spots. One of the officers, a seasoned veteran of the Metropolitan Police, felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He had seen enough in his years on the force to know that things were not always as they seemed. A forensic team was called. The flat was declared a crime scene. The world outside, the bustling, indifferent life of London, was shut out. Inside number 36, Alderney Street, a mystery was beginning to unfold. A mystery that would draw in the shadowy world of international espionage, challenge the competence of Britain's most elite police and intelligence agencies, and leave a family in Wales heartbroken and searching for answers that might never come. Carefully, the forensic officers went to work. They documented everything, every fingerprint, every fiber. The bag was the focus of their attention. It was a standard sports holdall, about a meter long. The padlock was a common brass one. They unzipped it, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense silence of the small room. As the bag was opened, the source of the smell and the heat's grim purpose became horrifyingly clear. Curled inside, in the fetal position, was the naked, decomposing body of a man. It was Gareth Williams. There were no obvious signs of injury, no marks of a struggle. But the position of the body, the locked bag, the silent, sterile flat, nothing about the scene suggested a natural death. The keys to the padlock were inside the bag, lying underneath his body. As news of the discovery broke, it sent a shockwave through the British establishment. This was not just any man. This was an officer of MI6, a guardian of the nation's secrets, found dead in the most bizarre and disturbing of circumstances. The press descended on Pimlico, their cameras and microphones a stark contrast to the covert world that Gareth Williams had inhabited. The questions began immediately, and they were as unsettling as the discovery itself. Was this an accident, a bizarre case of autoeroticism gone wrong? Or was this something far more sinister? Was this a murder? And if so, who would kill a spy and leave him in such a macabre tableau? The investigation into the death of the spy in the bag had begun, and with it, a descent into a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and unanswered questions. Gareth Williams was a man of contrasts, a puzzle long before he became the center of a murder investigation. He was born in Holyhead, on the Welsh island of Anglesey, a place of rugged coastlines and close-knit communities, a world away from the gilded streets of Pimlico and the clandestine corridors of Vauxhall Cross. He was a child prodigy, a mathematical genius who reportedly started his degree at Bangor University at the age of 17, achieving a first-class degree in mathematics. His intellect was his passport out of a quiet life. He was recruited by GCHQ, the UK's signals intelligence agency in Cheltenham, a place where his extraordinary ability to decipher patterns and codes could be put to the service of the state. He was, by all accounts, brilliant at his job, a quiet, unassuming man who possessed a formidable mind. But he was also described as intensely private, a man who kept his professional and personal lives strictly separate. His family knew he did important work for the government, but they, like almost everyone else, were kept in the dark about the specifics. In 2009, he was seconded to MI6 in London, a move that brought him to the heart of Britain's foreign intelligence apparatus. He was training to become an operational officer, a role that would have taken him far from the academic world of code-breaking and into the far more dangerous and unpredictable world of human intelligence. He worked on sensitive projects, collaborating with American agencies like the NSA and the FBI. The secrets he held were of the highest order. His life in London was a world of his own making. He lived alone in the security service-vetted flat in Pimlico. He was an avid cyclist, known for his physical fitness. But there was another side to him, a side that only began to emerge after his death. Investigators discovered a wardrobe filled with £20,000 worth of designer women's clothing, including high-end dresses and shoes, all in pristine condition. He had also visited bondage and sadomasochism websites, though police analysis suggested these visits were infrequent and not obsessive. His landlady from his time in Cheltenham told a strange story to the police. 3 years before his death, she and her husband had found him in his flat, shouting for help. He was tied to his bedposts, and he claimed he was testing his ability to free himself, an act of escapology. They cut him loose, believing the incident to be of a sexual nature. Was this the key to his death? A private life of transvestism and bondage that had somehow, tragically gone wrong. The Metropolitan Police's Counterterrorism Command, SO 15, was tasked with the investigation, a clear sign of how seriously the authorities were taking the case. They had to navigate a minefield of national security concerns. MI6, notoriously secretive, was protective of its methods and its people. A public interest immunity certificate was signed by the Foreign Secretary, William Hague, effectively drawing a veil over the details of Williams's work and his collaborations with the U.S. The early days of the investigation were fraught with difficulty. The decomposition of the body, accelerated by the heat in the flat, meant that the cause of death was impossible to determine with certainty. The pathologist could find no injuries, and toxicology tests showed no signs of alcohol or common recreational drugs. The cause of death was officially unascertained. The focus, therefore, fell on the bag. How did he get inside? And how was it padlocked? The question became the central riddle of the case. 2 experts in escapology were consulted by the police. They tried and failed repeatedly to lock themselves inside an identical bag in the same position. They concluded it was impossible for Williams to have done so without assistance. There were no fingerprints from Williams found on the padlock, the zip, or even on the rim of the bath, suggesting he hadn't touched them. If he couldn't have locked himself in, then someone else must have done it. The investigation shifted from a possible accident to a probable murder. But who? And why? The police were facing a near-perfect crime. There was no sign of forced entry into the flat. Inconclusive fragments of DNA from at least 2 other people were found on the bag, but no definitive forensic link to a suspect could be made. The media, starved of concrete facts, filled the vacuum with speculation. The dark arts of the intelligence world were a popular theory. Had Williams stumbled upon a dangerous secret? Had he been targeted by a foreign power? The story of his death had all the hallmarks of a spy thriller, and the press ran with it. The police, meanwhile, pursued more prosaic lines of inquiry. They released an e-fit of a Mediterranean-looking couple who had been seen entering the communal hallway of his building in the months before his death. But this lead, like so many others, went nowhere. As the investigation dragged on, frustration grew, particularly for Gareth's family. They felt that MI6 was not being fully cooperative. It had taken the agency a full week to report him missing, a delay that had catastrophic consequences for the preservation of forensic evidence. The family began to suspect a cover-up, a feeling that would only intensify as the case progressed. In April 2012, nearly 2 years after the discovery of his body, the official inquest into the death of Gareth Williams began at Westminster Coroner's Court. It was a moment of public reckoning, a chance for the facts, as far as they were known, to be laid bare. The inquest was presided over by Dr. Fiona Wilcox, a coroner known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense approach. Over 8 days, the court heard from a range of witnesses, police officers, forensic experts, family members, and in a rare move, intelligence officers who gave evidence from behind screens to protect their identities. The picture that emerged was one of institutional failure and lingering mystery. The court heard of MI6's 7-day delay in raising the alarm. Williams's line manager believed he was on leave. His sister, Carrie, had tried to contact him, her calls and texts going unanswered, her anxiety growing with each passing day. The coroner was scathing in her criticism of the intelligence service, calling their failure to act a breakdown in communication that had caused extra anguish for the family and hampered the police investigation. The police investigation also came under fire. The court learned that 9 memory sticks belonging to Williams, found in his office at MI6 headquarters, had not been passed on to the senior investigating officer until the inquest was already underway. It was a shocking lapse, and Dr. Wilcox did not hold back. It would appear that many agencies fell short, she declared. The central question of the bag was examined in forensic detail. The escapologists who had tried and failed to replicate the feat gave their evidence. The court heard that even if Williams had managed to contort himself into the bag, the act of zipping it and padlocking it from the outside without leaving a trace of his own DNA or fingerprints was highly unlikely. Dr. Wilcox listened to all the evidence, to the theories about his private life and the speculation about his secret work. In her final verdict, she was unequivocal. She rejected the idea that his death was an accident related to some form of autoerotic activity. His visits to bondage websites, she said, were intermittent and not indicative of an active interest. The stories about his interest in cross-dressing, she suggested, could have been a deliberate attempt at media manipulation by unknown parties to distract from the real cause of death. Her conclusion was stark and damning. "I am satisfied that on the balance of probabilities," she announced to the silent courtroom, "Gareth was killed unlawfully. His death was unnatural and likely to have been criminally mediated." She stated that it was probable that another person or persons had placed him in the bag and locked it. She even went so far as to say that the involvement of the Secret Services in the death remained a legitimate line of inquiry. For Gareth's family, the verdict was a vindication. They had always believed he was murdered. In a statement, they said the coroner's conclusion accurately reflected the circumstances of his death. The mystery, it seemed, was not if he was killed, but by whom and why. Dr. Wilcox, however, offered a sobering final thought. Given the loss of evidence and the wall of secrecy surrounding the case, she said it was unlikely that the exact circumstances of his death would ever be explained. The coroner's verdict should have been the final word, the official recognition of a terrible crime. But in the strange and murky world of the Gareth Williams case, nothing was that simple. In the wake of the inquest, the Metropolitan Police launched a review of their own investigation. For a further 12 months, they re-examined the evidence, pursuing new leads and, they claimed, being granted unprecedented access to serving MI6 staff. In November 2013, the Met announced their findings, and they were stunning. In a direct contradiction of the coroner's verdict, Deputy Assistant Commissioner Martin Hewitt declared that the most probable scenario was that Gareth Williams had died alone, accidentally locking himself inside the bag. The police theory was that it was theoretically possible for Williams to have gotten into the bag and locked it himself. They acknowledged the evidential contradictions and gaps in our understanding for both the accident and murder hypotheses, but they concluded that the absence of any concrete evidence of a third party being present made the accident theory more probable. The DNA fragments on the bag were dismissed as inconclusive. The lack of forced entry was seen as further evidence that he was alone. The detective who led the initial inquiry, Hamish Campbell, even told a newspaper that he suspected the death was linked to Williams's private life, not his work. The reversal was met with widespread disbelief and outrage. For the family, it was a devastating blow. Their lawyer accused the police of trying to avoid the most obvious explanation for his death. Critics saw it as a desperate attempt by the establishment to close the book on a case that was deeply embarrassing to both the police and the intelligence services. The idea of a cover-up, once a fringe theory, now seemed plausible to many. How could the police conclusion be so different from that of a coroner who had heard all the same evidence? The case went cold. The official narrative was now hopelessly fractured. A coroner who said it was murder, and a police force that said it was an accident. For the public, the mystery of the spy in the bag was deeper and more troubling than ever. The case was never closed, but it faded from the headlines, another one of London's unsolved mysteries. In 2021, and again in 2024, the Metropolitan Police announced they were conducting forensic reviews of the case, looking for new opportunities to apply modern DNA techniques to the evidence collected more than a decade earlier. Hopes were raised that a breakthrough might finally be possible, but both reviews ended in disappointment. No new DNA evidence was found to suggest the presence of another person in the flat. The forensic science that had promised so much had, in the end, only deepened the silence. The flat at 36 Alderney Street has long since been sold. Life has moved on, but the ghost of Gareth Williams lingers. He remains a man of shadows, his life defined by secrets and his death by a riddle that seems designed to be unsolvable. Was he a victim of his own dangerous private pursuits? A man who died in a bizarre accident that defied logic and expert opinion? Or was he a casualty of the great game of espionage? A man who knew too much and was silenced by a ruthless and unseen enemy, his murder then obscured by a state-sanctioned cover-up? The two competing narratives, the coroner's verdict of unlawful killing and the police conclusion of a tragic accident, hang in the air, irreconcilable and deeply unsettling. One speaks of a crime that was never solved, the other of a tragedy that was never properly explained. Both leave the family of Gareth Williams without the one thing they have sought from the beginning, the truth. In a quiet cemetery in Valley Anglesey, under the wide Welsh sky, lies the grave of Gareth Williams. The boy who was a genius with numbers, the man who was a keeper of secrets, is at rest. But the questions surrounding his final, lonely hours in a top-floor London flat remain, a chilling and poignant testament to a mystery that the worlds of espionage and law enforcement have been unable, or perhaps unwilling, to solve. The Spy in the Bag remains an enigma, a story without an ending, a life reduced to a question mark.